Good afternoon or good morning, everybody. Welcome to today's webinar, Simple Shortcuts and Workflow Tips. So today, we are breaking down some various things that we want to show you into 6 or different categories. And once again, sharing the workload between myself, David at the top. I'm part of the software sales team based out of Copenhagen in Denmark. And below is Alex, and I can hear Alex rustling away in the background. Hi, Alex.
Oh no, hi. I hope it's not.
Oh no. Yeah, you didn't get away with it. So today we're going to split it up, as I said, and show you some various different helpful things to speed through your workflow a bit quicker. As usual, we have 60 minutes to run maximum. We may or may not need all of that. You're very welcome and encouraged to ask questions throughout. Some of you have already discovered how to do that, but if not, on your Mac or PC, if you look at the bottom of the GoToWebinar control panel, the last section you'll see is called questions. So put a question in there that will come straight through to me and Alex. If you're on iOS or Android, find the question mark icon and you can ask a question in the same way. We are recording too, and we get this up online tomorrow, so you can watch it again in all its glory. So let us begin. All right, now it's me starting, so you should be able to see Capture One on screen right now. And just to, whoops, and I've just ruined the crop which I had on there. So just to help you locate the mouse, let's get mouse locator running, and you might see the mouse from time to time looking like this. Okay, so the first thing that I'm going to look at is some couple of tips for importing. So this is kind of mostly relevant for catalogs, but there's a couple of principles in there which also work with sessions. So don't worry if you're on a session user, this kind of stuff will work too. But I'm just going to make us a new catalog. So file new catalog. Let's call this webinar PM and say OK. So we've got a brand new catalog opening up, and before I start my import process, I'm going to make myself a user collection. So user collections, which we won't go into massive detail today, it's like virtual organization. So we're not moving files around on disk, it's just using the power of the catalog to list your images in various different collections, like, for example, a simple album. So before importing, I'm going to make an album which is going to be a container for my images. So this is going to be my urban landscapes long-term project, and we'll say OK, and I'm just going to select that. Now I'm going to start my import process. So file, import images, and I'm going to pull some images from an external hard drive. So they're just on this hard drive here, images, import collection. Same principle applies, and this is exactly what I do if I've been shooting to memory card in camera over a few days and I just want to import these images in, but I might not necessarily format my memory card just yet. And I just want to bring them in and sort them automatically in Capture One. And automatically, let's just reset this tool so you can see how it works, is that we can use something in Capture One called tokens to sort our images into folders based on a whole bunch of different criteria. So that could be the camera serial number, handy if you shoot with more than one camera at a wedding, for example. The example I'm going to use is sorting by the date that they were captured. So destination, first of all, I'm not going to leave them in their current location. I'm going to choose a folder. And I'll show you how I set this up. Let's say you're storing images in the pictures folder, but it could be an external hard drive or anywhere else. Let's make a new folder. I'm going to call this all catalog images, like so, and say set as import folder. And you'll see a new field has popped up called subfolder. Now I can freehand type in here if I want to, for example, but I can also use a dynamic token as I just mentioned. So clicking on the little box here, opens up the menu which allows you to choose a whole bunch of different tokens. I think we have 60 or 70 odd here. It's very unlikely you're going to use all of them, but a couple of them are really handy. So the one I'm going to pick is the image date. So this is the date the image was captured based on the metadata that is present in the raw file, or indeed the JPEG. Now, if you don't like month, day, year, then you can just pick another format here, like year, month, day, for example. So now each image that is imported, the date is checked and a folder is created for that date that it was captured. So it's a very simple organizational item like so. Down here under metadata, we can add some basic copyright. So I'll put that here, and you can also add a description, which pops up in the description too. And under collection, by default, it goes to recent imports only. So that's this little item here. So that will show you the last 10 imports you've made. But I'm going to say do it in the selected album, like so. So
it's worth mentioning, David,
yes,
that it will still show up in recent imports, even though you do this.
Yes, it will still show up in recent imports. And a very relevant question for Graham, well done, Graham, is there a token for a space, say, between day and month? Well, you've got image date, but if we look in the token list, you'll also find separate tokens for, if we scroll down, image month. So you could say, image month, and then you could put a dash in between it or an underscore or something else. So if there's anything here which kind of doesn't work for you, you can just build it with image month. You'll find image day of the week, image day of the month, image date, and then you've got image year down here. So you can build whatever kind of date structure you wanted with those separate processes. And David says you imported to your internal drive, not the SSD. Is this your normal import procedure? Well, yes. I mean, just pretend, David, that the SSD is a memory card. So I'm just using the SSD because it's a bit quicker and I sorted some images. But this is what I would be doing if I was importing from memory card to my internal hard drive, or indeed external hard drive where I store all my images. So let's come back out of that.
Ooh, super question from Michael. Can you do multiple levels of subfolders?
God, everyone's well on the ball today, aren't they? So yes. So say if you wanted to do image date and let's say camera serial number, then you could do a /. So you see now we've got a sub level or another level in the folder as an empty name because I don't have a token. And then we could have camera, if I can type, all fingers and thumbs, camera serial number, like so. So that would give us the date, the subfolder, and the camera serial number. So if you wanted to go one more again, Michael, you would just do another / and use another token. So yes, you could. Or of course, you could do camera serial number first. Geez, I cannot hit the A key today. And then have your / in between those. So yes, you could. Great question, Michael. Spot on. I'll just keep it simple and do image date for now and say, okay. So we've got destination all catalog images sorted by the subfolder based on the date they were captured. It's going to urban landscapes and it's going to add my basic copyright. Now, all of this stuff you can do afterwards. You could sort them into dates after, you could make a user collection and so on. But the whole point is doing this all in one go. And I'm just going to remove this one because that's something we're going to do after Dick, who was asking. Okay, so let's hit the import button down here. That's not very many images. We can see if I just hide my viewer for a second, there's the images popping in. They're loading into this collection. Now the import has finished. And I chose these images so they were a broad selection of dates. So now you can see that Capture One sorted them into all the various different folders like so. And Michael, who was asking, then yes, you could have your second subset of like camera serial number and then the date, for example. Alex, you were going to say something?
Oh yeah, it was just these date folders are physical folders on the hard drive, while the urban landscapes is a virtual folder or an
Yes.
album that
So if we,
only exists inside Capture One. It's just to
exactly.
clarify it.
So if we right click on this guy and say show in Finder, then we can see it right here like so, catalog images. Now, if we just pick one of those and let's just pick one of mine because it's all my copyright and these are not all my pictures, very naughty. You can see copyright notice has been added here like so. So that's the basic copyright. But if we wanted to be a bit better photographers, we could add more metadata here and also have that added to the image on import. So if I make some metadata here, so the creator, let's say, is David Grover, job title, photographer, and address, my street, number 52 or whatever, city, my city, not going to give you my address away, of course, country, Denmark, I'd get hate mail, website, www.phase1.com, and you could fill in any more IPTC content you wanted. Now, Dickie was asking, can you apply a style on import? And yes, you can indeed a preset. So I'm going to save this user preset and just have a quick look down the list to make sure that there's nothing here that shouldn't be here. For example, rating or a color tag. Because we don't want those as a preset because that's going to mess up, all your images if you use that preset on images that are already present in your catalog and session. So I'll save that and let's call this my metadata preset 2018 and say save. Oh, Scott's telling us off because I've written copyright wrong. So Scott says it should be copyright year 2018, David Grover. There we go, like that. So that's how it should be, but that's not the preset I've saved. So there is the correct way to write it. And all we would do on import, again, I won't import the same stuff again, is that now under adjustments, we would pick user presets, my metadata preset 2018, and that will simply apply that to all the images on import, once again saving you a step, and we wouldn't need to put that there like so. And of course you could have different metadata presets depending on clients or how much you wanted to include and so on and so forth. Alrighty, that's it for that little importing section.
Yes.
Yes, it
It's
is.
great. And many good questions, I have to say.
Yeah, well done, troops out there. That's fantastic. I mean, and the nice thing about this is that once you're set up, like I store all my images on an external hard drive because I need more space. They all go into a master folder. So whenever I import, all of this is sticky. I never have to change my destination. I just have to change the subfolder, but I tend to import by event and date or whatever. So let's say I went on vacation Canada or whatever, then there's nothing to stop you doing that as well, mixing tokens with handwritten stuff. So that would have an event name and then also the sorted by date as well. So
It's a
there's
good question
plenty of stuff you can do.
from Carl here. Will a metadata preset overwrite existing data?
That is a very good question.
I think it will.
I think it will. So let's apply the earlier preset, which I did here. Yeah, so you see it's overwriting because I did a slightly different one this morning. But if there's an empty category, then I believe it will fill in that empty category as well.
Yes, so
yes.
It will not, I guess it will kind of merge whatever
Merge
is
the two.
there.
Exactly.
But the preset will override any existing fields.
Yes, correct. Okay, all right. Next bit is with Alex. So that's working with large batches.
Woo!
Woo. So let's switch over, make presenter, and you should, or we will see Alex on screen in a second. Yes, we can see your screen.
Great, and my mouse, and everything is working, it seems
Yep,
like.
even
Yeah,
better.
so when working with large batches in Capture One, there are some tricks to, it's just nice to know, it can be time savers. Because, I mean, if you don't know some of the tricks, you might have to, or you might be doing the same thing over and over again in a difficult way. So the first thing I'm going to mention is a batch rename method that some people might not be aware of. So let's say that you have imported a wedding. This is actually a real wedding that I shot a long time ago. 500 images, and you mistakenly set or imported with the name Tina and David, and then you realized, oh, her name was not Tina. So
That would be bad.
yeah, or you misspelled something, but you want to keep the the number sequence. So what you can do is select all of the images. I pressed Command A, Control A on a Windows. Then you right click an image and go to batch rename. And it's popping up this message because this is a catalog where I have the images imported, referenced on an external hard drive. That's okay. So the default method is simply text and tokens. Just like David showed in subfolders, you can add tokens to this field. But for this specific purpose, I'm gonna click find and replace. So what this does is you enter something here, let's say Tina, David, and then I realized actually both names were wrong. So let's say Sue and Alex. So what you can see here is it finds this part of the image file name and replaces it with this part. And rename, and boom, done. Almost. It takes 10 seconds because they're on an external drive.
But it's still pretty speedy and a lot easier than
Yeah.
doing it. I mean, this question came up on one of our social media channels, didn't it, last week? And 10 people
Yes.
came up with, oh, you can use this app, or you do this in Finder, or you need this Windows app, and so on. It's like, no, you just do it in Capture One, and then you don't end up with issues of file names being different and session or catalog being messed up, and so on. So this is by far the best way to do it.
And again, let me just show it again. Right click, batch rename, find and replace, and let's say we want to replace the underscore with a hyphen. It's also completely possible, simply like this. It's a very easy batch rename certain parts of the name. So that's the first thing. Next thing when working with batches of images is how to copy and apply to multiple images, or simply how to like master the copy and apply of adjustments within Capture One. So let me quickly do some edits of this one. Clarity, vignetting, and some. There we go. All right. So I have all of these adjustments, and then the easiest way to copy to the next image is to go up here and click copy. Then I select my next image and click apply. Just to reset this one, I can of course choose many images and apply to all of those at the same time. So it's not just from one image to another, it's from one to as many as you want. But what if, let me just select the crop tool here, and I'm long pressing to get this menu. Another way is to select the crop tool and, oh, spoiler alert, David is going to get to that.
That's later, yeah.
Yeah. So let's assume that I crop this image like so. This is a church in Denmark. It's actually pretty astonishing. So if I copy this, go to the next image and apply, it's going to include the crop. Okay, for this image, it actually works. But let's say I didn't want the crop to be applied. So if we just undo and actually reset this image to go back to scratch, and then copy this. Then I can go into the adjustment clipboard up here, and this is this tool. So this will show all the adjustments I've made to the first image that is now included in the clipboard for copying and applying. And you can see composition is included. So after copying, if I deselect this one, composition, it will not be included when I then apply. So that's a way to control which settings will be applied when copying between images. Okay. Let me also apply to this one. This is actually shot a bit darker, so I need to boost the brightness of that. There we go. All right, so that was like a global copy apply of multiple tools. So now I'm gonna, let's say that I've edited all these with my white balance and exposure and contrast and all of that. And now I want to add color grading. So I go into the color balance tool and do some teal orange color grading. Let me go. Yeah, that's okay. And now I want this color grading to be applied to all the other images without affecting any other tools. So what I do here is hold down my shift key and then click this tiny double-sided arrow. And when I click that, it will simply take this color grading and nothing else and apply to the rest of the images. So it will take the settings from the image you have highlighted among your selection and copy, apply onto the rest of your selection. Okay?
Yeah, and it's important to note that the shift click, I mean, it's not essential to shift, but it just suppresses a dialogue which you generally don't need. So it just makes the whole thing faster. Yeah.
So if I click here, I'll get this dialogue and what to copy and what to apply. But if this is on the crop, for example, if I want to copy this crop to this image, I simply hold down the shift key and click. Boom.
And done. Much
done.
quicker.
Yeah. But let's reset this one. There we go. Okay, the next thing is this icon up here, edit all selected variants. Because let's say that I have this selection of images and I want to reset one of them, and I don't want to deselect all of them and then select the one I want to reset. Simply want to start over with, let's say, this image. So if I deselect this one, it's also available from edit all selected variants. So when that is not ticked, and this is gray and not orange, it will only affect the highlighted image among the selection. So if I reset this one, this is the only one that's being affected by it. And it's the same with exporting and deleting, because it's one of the most common questions from Capture One users. I've selected multiple images. Why is only one being deleted or exported? And this is the answer.
It tends to trip everybody up at some point because they've inadvertently clicked that button and thought, well, didn't seem to do anything. So, but then, yeah, it can be quite frustrating if you're trying to do a batch action and it doesn't work. So that's the one. And you might be thinking, well, what's the point of having it? But it actually has some very, very powerful uses for looking at images, but only affecting some.
Yeah, I'm gonna, actually, we can go to that now. What I just did here was a shortcut. It's Command-Shift-C for copy and Command-Shift-V for apply. And it's Control instead of Command if you're on a Windows.
Yep.
But speaking of this, we have something called sets in Capture One. So let's say that you have these images or a series of images of similar look, and they all look kind of alike, and you need to find the best one. Let me just show the viewer labels like this. All right, so you can compare multiple images by selecting multiple images, and then you can rate them one at a time. So let's say that you Want to go through the images like this: 5 stars, 2 stars, 3 stars, and 4 stars. This is only possible to do if this is disabled, because if it was enabled with this selection and I clicked 5 on my keyboard, all of them would get 5 stars, as you can see. So this is a good way to, like, it's just a powerful little toggle in your workflow. So here I can individually rate the images. And then when I get to the last one in this set, there's actually a default shortcut to get to the next 6 images. Because in Capture One, when you select multiple images, they automatically become a temporary set. So if I hold down the Alt key or the Option key and click right arrow on my keyboard, I'll get the next 6 images. So this is a quick way to cull through your images and comparing them if they are kind of similar. So, and then Option, right click, next 6 images, and like so. And you can do as many images as you want in a set.
Depending how big your monitor is.
Yeah. True, true. Let's actually keep this set selected of 6 images and go to the next little tip. It's in the toolbar. Let me just, because by default, you don't have this icon up in the toolbar. So I'm going to show you how to add it. But first, it's also available from View. And it is the focus mask, show focus mask. And what that will do is show a green overlay where the image is in focus. And to get it up here as a toggle, you right click, go to Customize Toolbar, and then you have a bunch of different icons. The focus mask is placed here, drag it in. There we go, done. And now you can actually see where the image is in focus without having to zoom in. Let me just select one image in the viewer and double click to zoom. You can see that the eye is kind of soft while the hair back here, they're sharp. It's shot with a 100 megapixel phase 1. So the depth of field is very, very shallow on a medium format camera. So I was only, I think, 2 inches too close before the focus was back here. But this is simply an easy way to see, is it in focus or not? And I can see all of these, the front eye should be in focus, and with the help of the focus mask, I can see that none of these are in focus. So let's switch to the next set. No, still no. Next set. There we go. We have one up here. If I disable multi-view, zoom in, and render, I can see that the eye is now in focus. Let me enable multi-view again. So this is a quick way to determine whether an image is sharp or not. It also actually shows on the thumbnail. I don't know if you can see it in the GoToWebinar monitor.
Yeah, just about. Yeah.
Yeah, the thumbnail actually also shows it. And it's also very useful if you shoot tethered in a studio or something, to simply enable this and quickly determine. I mean, you don't even have to get close to your monitor to see if the focus is where you want it.
And you can always put on some layering different color if green isn't right for you. As Dick was asking, what about preferences for threshold? Preferences for focus mask, because there is a couple of sliders you can tweak for it.
Yes, let's go into that now. So the next area is preference tweaks that you might not be aware of.
Yep.
So preferences. If you go to focus here, first of all, while we have the focus mask on, you have an opacity slider. It's pretty self-explanatory. You have a color where you can select any color you want, and you have a threshold. That is useful for when shooting with different resolution cameras, because the threshold is kind of the sensitivity towards sharpness in relation to the resolution of your image. So this is a 100 megapixel phase one image. So the threshold should be kind of low on this one. But I sometimes shoot with a 12 megapixel Nikon as well. And for those images, I have the threshold kind of high. But as you can see, on a 100 megapixel camera, you barely get any results with the threshold this high. So keep it low, the higher the resolution you have on your camera.
Yes.
Yeah. And just disable the focus mask and go to the next one. Preferences. No, actually, first it's about highlight warning. So I need to push my levels a bit. So we have the highlight warning up here, which will give a warning if you exceed your like a highlight warning level.
Clipping, I guess. Clipping of the histogram. Yep.
Exactly. So if you go into preferences and within exposure, you have settings for the highlight warning. So by default, I don't think the shadow warning is even enabled.
No, it's not, which is kind of silly, but you have to manually turn it on if you want to use shadow warning. Yes.
Yeah, I think it's pretty useful because it'll show you, it gives you two ends of the spectrum to control in terms of warning. But this is where you control the levels of your warnings. Yeah. So let's disable that. And just
I
give
tend
it
to sort of set mine, 253 and 2 or 3, just so I can start to see when it's about to clip, not when it's actually clipping.
Yeah, so close to the edge and not over the edge.
Yeah, and there's no right or wrong settings for this. You'll ask 10 people what they should be, and they come up with 10 different answers. So whatever makes you happy, I guess.
Yeah. Perfect. So the next one is the proof margin. And let me just get it back to, I think, what it is by default. I think it's 20 pixels. It's within appearance. And this will affect the margin when you enable proof margin up here. So you can see there's a slight distance from the viewer, a margin to the image. And simply to get a bit more space around the image. But in preferences, you can actually control the size of this proof margin. I like to have it around 100 pixels, actually, to get a lot of space around the image. And in here, you can also change the viewer color. And sometimes I like to keep it white because I have a website with a white background. And I would like to know what this image looks like on a white background with some space around it. So this is a way to check that. But the proof margin up here, definitely useful. I use it for basically every image I edit.
Yeah, I do as well. Just I think having a little frame around it just helps sometimes to visualize the end result better rather than it being squashed up against the edge. And I also hide the viewer label as it's known, so the metadata at the bottom I find distracting. So if we hide that one, then I think then you've got a nice clean image which helps you to assess it better, I think.
Definitely. The last thing I'm going to show before I hand the torch back to David is the resource hub, because we made a lot of upgrades to that recently. So if you go to help, if you've disabled it, and go to resource hub, this will pop up. You might have seen it in the beginning of maybe your first installation of Capture One.
Yep, a year ago or 2 years ago.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But it has some tabs. The what's new is the default one, where it has, this is actually the webinar going on right now. And this is the newest blog post. But if you go to tutorials, you have a direct link to the most popular tutorials here. Oh, it seems to be a feeding issue here with the thumbnail. And webinars as well. So here you have upcoming webinars and recorded webinars. So these two are super nice for like an instant access to educational material to learn about Capture One. If you have any issues, you can go to support and go to the help site or if it's a hardcore technical issue, you can contact our support department. They are ready to help. So that's a resource hub.
Yes.
Yeah, and I think that's it for now from me.
Yep. Now it's my turn. So
Yes.
let's take, make me the presenter and show my screen. So you can see my screen. And just as an example, this is shot on a D850, I think. So still high resolution, but not quite 100 megapixels. Yep, D850. And you can see just by looking at the threshold that I can have this, it's very low and I get kind of a broad idea of focus. And if I go to this way, you can see that it's much more critical. But once again, still very easy to see where the focus plane is accurately and quickly. And as Alex said, if you're, whoops, not there, let's come out of that. If you're looking at thumbnails, then it's very quick to assess exactly where the focus plane is. So super simple, but you just have to tweak it to your own preference or case by case, depending on the camera itself. So I've got some, let's turn you off. I've got some shortcuts to look at as well. So more like key combination or key press shortcuts. So an obvious simple one, but just in case you don't know it, this button up here, this is the master reset button. So that will reset the image back to defaults. Holding down your Alt key and clicking it gives you a before and after. Let's actually pick a black and white so it's easier to see, for example. So if I do Option click, then that shows me before and after. But it doesn't reset the crop or rotation. You see this image has a rotation and crop. That's ignored in the temporary reset because that would be distracting. Just image adjustments only. So Option click on the reset button like so. The cursor tools, these guys up here, these can be selected with shortcut keys like C for crop, for example, R for straighten. The Loupe is P, I think. Can't remember what the Loupe is. Z, sorry, Loupe is Z, and so on. Now you'll notice that with the shortcut keys, like the Loupe, for example, it has different operations, or with the straighten tool, it has different operations as well. So to avoid you having to, if you like, mouse up to this point and choose it, then notice that the keyboard shortcut was R, but if I do Shift R, then it will just cycle through those various different options. So the mouse can stay where it needs to be. Or Shift H, for example, that will cycle through the various different hand tool aspects, like moving the overlay, moving the watermark, or moving the image. So Shift and whatever the keyboard shortcut is. Handy one for crop. So pressing C gives me my crop tool. Now, if you've made a crop but you think it's not quite right, you can, of course, drag the boundaries like the edge or the corners and, of course, move it in the middle. But let's say in this case, I wanted to do a tighter crop. To disregard whatever the current crop is, if I hold my Shift key down, you see the cursor changes. It'll disregard the current crop and I can simply draw a new one like so. So it's great just if you think, you know what, that crop isn't working, let's just reset it and Shift crop to make it, totally different, like so. So Shift crop to disregard the current one. Control to give you a context menu. So whenever you're using a cursor tool, or indeed a few, cursor tools mostly, if you right click or control click, you'll find you'll get some kind of additional submenu. So using the hand tool, if I right click, we get a mini navigator. So I can pan around the image quite nicely, especially if I'm looking to blast dust spots or anything like that. It can be, quite a nice way to do it. So right click gives me the mini navigator with the hand tool. Now, if I was cropping again, so let's press C to get my crop tool back up. If I thought, you know what, maybe a square aspect ratio would work well for this guy, I can mouse up here and choose square, but to save me a mouse trip, I can right click and the pointer will be automatically right on the drop down menu, the ratio menu. So I don't have to move, I can just right click, click, and choose square, and then the menu disappears, and then straight away I can do that. You'll also find you'll get submenus, like if we were doing perspective correction and I right click, I get the keystone tool popping up. If I was picking a curve point, so if I had the curve point picker like so, and let's just get rid of that, and I right click, oh, my mistake, pick RGB curve point, and I right click, then the curve tool pops up. So, you know, give it a try. Any of the cursor tool will pop up some kind of subcontext menu like so. What's my next one? Control, done that one. Oh yeah, instant loop. So you saw the loop briefly. So the loop, remember, just gives you that way to view 100% straight away. Sometimes helpful if your machine isn't as quick as it could be. I mean, this is a D850 image and I can zoom into 100%, you know, pretty much instantaneously. But if your machine is a bit older, then you might find the loop works a bit better. Now, to save you having to choose the loop cursor tool, at any point you can do Alt spacebar and that will give you a loop. Now, if you're on PC, it's Control spacebar, just to confuse you. But I have to hold it down and then I get a loop regardless of what cursor tool I'm using. And I can also use this on the browser as well. So loop tool works just as nicely on the browser as it does on the main viewer as well. You do have a bit of influence over how the loop looks, so you can have small, medium, large loop, what zoom percentage you're going to, a centered loop. You'll saw with a normal loop that it kind of flips around, so depending on where the cursor is, if you find that bothersome, a centered loop means that it's just literally right slap bang in the center. So it's not dancing around when you get to the edge of a screen. But a really nice way to quickly assess something at 100% without having to jump in at max zoom. All right. So that's some little nifty things you can do with cursor tools and clicking. The next one is working with sliders, because there's quite a few hidden little shortcuts which are really handy. Let's just change the exposure a bit on this one. Now on each of the sliders, and it doesn't matter which tool we're in, if we long press on the name of the slider, it gives you a before and after of just that slider. So clicking on the name. So you can preview what the slider is doing, so you can decide if you've overcooked it or undercooked it or not. Double clicking anywhere on the slider bar, tap, tap, takes it back to 0. So it's really handy for resetting just the one slider. It's way quicker than trying to re-zero it. Just double click anywhere and it will reset. Like the master reset here for everything, option click, as you remember. Option click in the tool itself on the reset button is again a before and after. So if you're used to Lightroom with its on-off buttons on the tools, this is a way of previewing what the whole stack of sliders is doing for that particular tool. If you don't like to drag sliders, then there's nothing to stop you tabbing into the numerical value box and typing in a value. So if you're really precise, you could say, you know, I want to have 0.1 or whatever, and then it will do so. When you're in an input box like that, you can use the cursor keys to go up and down. You can use shift cursor to do bigger jumps, like so. If you have a scrolly mouse, you can hover over the slider and scroll up and down. If you have a trackpad that has a scrolling ability, like my MacBook Pro, then I can two-finger drag up and down as well. And if that's still not enough for you, in the keyboard shortcuts, edit keyboard shortcuts, on the PC, it's in this menu. Under edit keyboard shortcuts, under adjustments, under, I can't remember where it is, Alex. It's under other, maybe. Here we go, under other, exposure. Then you can have shortcuts for adjusting the exposure. So this one would be Control Option equals. So if we do that, Control Option equals, Try that again. Equals, or was it Control Command? Well, either way, it's not working on my keyboard. Hang on. Control Command equals or minus. Okay, so there we go. So like so. Now the benefit of using the keyboard shortcut is that, of course, the tool doesn't have to be active. Now, a lot of people who deal with a lot of batches quite often like using the keyboard shortcuts because they can go to the next image, use their keyboard shortcut, go to the next image, use their keyboard shortcut, and so on. So that might be something for you to explore as well. So lots of different ways of playing with sliders. Now, the last thing that you can do to maybe save you some time is that for each tool, you can save a default. So Capture One has defaults for every single camera we support. I mean, generally everything is zeroed out. The only thing that differs from camera to camera is default sharpening and default noise reduction. So if you feel the sharpening is not enough or too much, there's nothing to stop you changing it and then setting that as the defaults for that camera. So that's per camera. So if you owned a Nikon D850 and a Sony A7 or whatever, then depending on the image that arrives in Capture One, then it will share those different defaults. So I can say save as defaults like so. And we can apply that to the current one or don't apply. And then that means from now on, every single Nikon D850 image will have a new preset, or I can reset back to factory defaults like so. And then we can change it back to how Capture One feels it should be for that particular camera. Okie dokie, I think that's it for my section here. I mean, this is another alternative to the import preset. I mean, once you have this up and running, then you could easily just have a whole bunch of different defaults for all your cameras. So sharpening and noise reduction is the general sort of case, but if you felt you like to have, you know, some clarity on every single image, then you could also save that as a default as well. So sky's the limit with those. Okay, Alex, for finale time,
Yes.
we have one little section to do, which is just some layers stuff. So let me pass that over to you.
All about layers.
All about layers. Exactly. Awesome kind of nifty stuff, which you might not know you can do. So there we go. Over to you.
Great. Okay, so I have this image and I made this kind of color grading in Capture One. And to get that, you need to, of course, change the contrast, color grading, all sorts of stuff. Let me show you how to gain like optimal control of that. Usually when you think of layers in Capture One, you think that you add a layer, brush something in, and then you change something to that mask. But if you long press the new layer, you have new filled layer as an option. And let us just call that Luma contrast. There we go. And if I click M on my keyboard for mask, you can see that it covers the entire image already. So it's like a new adjustment layer in Photoshop, but it has nothing on it yet. So what I want to do first, and this is kind of a nifty trick, is to take opacity and start, let's say, 70. And you might think, why? That's super weird, but let me show you. So first, if I take my Luma curve and add some contrast, like so. Maybe that was a bit too much. There we go. Then the RGB curve, brighten it a bit, and high dynamic range. If I take shadows, like so. There we go. And we can see if I take this off, it has some kind of contrast to it. So the trick of starting at 70% is that I can now take the opacity and control all of these mixed adjustments with one slider. So I can take it down a notch or I can take it up a notch. So this is a way to control the overall contrast if it's mixed between multiple tools. So that was the first layer. Let me make another one, call it color grading, like so. Take opacity down to 70. Go to color grading and go to master. Let's say I want a cool tone to this image. So within the color balance tool, I take the master, drag it towards the cool edge here. Shadow, I want a bit towards the teal, maybe a bit of extra blacks in the shadow. Midtones, I want it to be a bit orange, warm, like so. What happens if I take the luminosity? Let me take it down actually. Highlights, a bit towards the teal, but not much, and up with the luminosity of the highlights. There we go. Now I have control of the opacity of my whole color grading with one slider. So I can take it down or all the way up.
Nice.
So yeah, so doing this, editing your images in layers will not only split up the different adjustments you make into a nice overview, but it also gives you the option to, with one single slider, take every group of adjustments on the layer and control it. So it just adds flexibility. And once you're used to this workflow by adding filled layers for each like group of adjustments, it doesn't really do any harm. It only adds more options to what you're doing.
I guess it's more of a slightly slower, more deliberate way of working, but it gives you tons of flexibility in the output. Because if you'd put your color grade just on the background layer and you wanted to just soften it a little, then you'd have to tweak a whole bunch of sliders, not just one. So if you're confident that you can lay your adjustments down and not fiddle with it, then more power to you. But I think none of us really, or very few of us, are that confident really when it comes to playing with adjustments. We always tend to go back and fiddle with someone a bit later. So it gives you lots of flexibility the next day, the day after, and so on.
Yeah, it's just a nice way of working, like a Photoshop way of working, where everything
totally.
is in layers.
Never work on the background layer. Yes, exactly. Yep.
Yeah. All right. So speaking of layers, if we go to preferences, nope, sorry, keyboard shortcuts.
Yes.
I even have a shortcut for keyboard shortcuts.
That'll make the computer explode, surely.
I'm that nerdy. If we go to other, scroll down, go to layers down here. We have a bunch of options for keyboard shortcuts for layers. And I think probably the most important one is toggle layer on and off. And I've set that to just a dot, a period, because that was apparently not used as a default shortcut. So if I select this layer and then click dot on my keyboard, it'll show me a before and after of this layer alone. This is a quick way to simply toggle a layer on and off. And the same with like clear mask, invert mask, or simply to create a new filled layer. You can add a bunch of different keyboard shortcuts. So I suggest go ahead and look at what's available in here, because the less you have to do with your mouse, I think the better off you are. It of course takes some time to get used to it, but I think it's worth the investment. There's a question about, by the way, when we're in here, how can you search your keyboard shortcuts? And I think the easiest way is to click down here and summarize, because that will give you a nice list of the entire keyboard shortcut list that you currently have, including the ones you've made yourself. Yep. And this list is perfectly searchable.
Yeah, you could just search that directly in the browser as well, I guess, couldn't you?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Nice. Oh, question from Lars. Can I copy a layer but not the settings applied in the layer? So I can use that layer settings on a new photo. So I guess just the yes and no, I suppose.
Let's so just the mask, I guess. but not the adjustments.
Yes.
Okay, so if you create a new layer and right click and say copy mask from, let's say Luma contrast. Oh, that's actually interesting because it didn't take over the opacity, but it
No.
took the actual mask. But since it was a
Mask.
fill mask, it didn't make any difference. So if I just clear this just to show how it would look, let's opacity. So like so, make a new layer, right click, copy from layer one, and you get the same mask.
Mm-hmm.
So that's a way to do that.
But between photos, you can copy the layer settings from one photo to another in exactly the same way as you showed earlier, but it would grab layers and adjustments.
It will include everything here, yes.
Yeah. Now, one little tip, which because layers you can't save a preset, and that's not because we're mean or stupid or whatever. It's very difficult. There's some workflow challenges, shall we say. Yes, you could quite easily save a layer preset of, say, 5 layers with various different things on them. But when you come to apply that preset to other images, then you have some workflow challenges, especially if the other images already have layers present or they have already exceeded or are close to exceeding the maximum number of layers allowed, and so on. So there's a few workflow challenges to iron out. It's not like we haven't thought of it. But one thing you can do, like for myself, I tend to have like 2 or 3 layers, one for lightning, one for darkening, and one for something else. So I have just like a dummy image, which I have in a catalog, or a few dummy images which have various different layer stacks, which I can copy and apply to other images. And I just keep them in an album called, layer donors, I think I called it, which has various different stacks that I can copy across.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Just following up on David's tip in the beginning, if I option click the layers tool, you can see that everything I've done to this image
Yeah.
is layers.
Yes.
And while David was talking, I added a burn layer with a dark RGB curve and this mask. So yeah, I think that was it from me about layers.
Yes, and that takes us nicely, almost spot on up to the hour. Now, the last couple of questions. Is it possible to group layers as in Photoshop? No. I mean, you have to get your head around slightly that this is, a raw photo editor, so we're not actually making any changes to the pixels whatsoever. It's just, if you like, an instruction that is a separate layer on the image, whereas in Photoshop, every adjustment you make is kind of destructive, and therefore you can merge a bunch of layers together as you wish, but that's not possible in this
No, but
case. So no.
I think he meant like grouping simply so you can
Oh,
collapse a group.
like this is my color
Yeah.
grading group, my retouch
Yes.
group, or whatever. No.
No, you
Would be
can't,
nice,
but it
perhaps.
would indeed be nice.
Yeah, it
Yeah.
would be. Yeah, I mean the max amount is 16 layers, so it never gets like totally out of control. But it
No.
might be nice to be able to do that. Yes, absolutely. Cameron says, how do you search keyboard shortcuts in the browser? Well, on Safari, I know it's Command F. Is it the same on Chrome?
Yeah, I think it's a universal, globally applicable search shortcut.
Yeah,
Command
so
F
yeah,
or
Command
Control
F
F.
in the browser or Control F brings up a little search, and then if you wanted to search for exposure, you could type that, and then it would show you up on the list. So
Yeah.
that should work. Cool. All right. Well, I'm going to grab the screen back off you, hopefully.
Yep.
Let's see. Make me presenter. And show my screen. There we go. So next webinar, and that actually ties in nicely with the last section you saw. So if you're new to layers, it's one of the best, most exciting things about working with Capture One, because it gives you so much flexibility. It's more Photoshop-like than Lightroom-like, because you're working in layers, as you saw, not with adjustment brushes. So next week is all about mastering layers from the basics to the more complex stuff. So we'll take you from top to bottom if you've yet to be introduced to the concept of layers. But once you start using them, there's no going back. Just really gives you all that flexibility in your image edit. So there we go. So thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. When you exit the webinar, you'll be asked to answer a survey. If you could, that would be great, as it gives us an idea of how we're performing or underperforming, of course. And roughly, probably this time tomorrow, you'll get a follow-up email, which will have a link to upcoming webinars and where you can find the recording as well. Or you can find it, of course, directly in the Resource Hub. So don't forget about checking out the Resource Hub on a regular basis. So thanks to you, Alex, again. And
thank you for having me.
Oh, always a pleasure, never a chore, as we say, and we'll see you again soon. So take care, everyone, and goodbye.
See ya.
Bye.